your time to join us with a special guest speaker. We really appreciate that. As you probably have been told by your coaches and your teammates, today we have former U.S. international player and professional soccer player and current broadcaster Alexi Lalas with us. You can see him in front of the American flag wearing his LMU polo. We also have today our coaching staffs from the men's and women's team. On the men's side, head coach Paul Crumpy and assistant coaches Kyle Schmid and Mike Osagora. And then on the women's soccer side, we have head coach Jenny Binden and assistant coaches Gina Brewer and Kevin Pineda. We also have the full teams. All of our returning players will be on the call as well. And then our sport administrators, Mariah Boehm and Thad Sater, as well as our deputy athletic director, Ashley Armstrong, joining the call. So we're very excited to get this group together and have an opportunity to both hear what Alexi has to say about his transition from a college player to the professional world, from a professional player to the business and broadcast world, overcoming different adversities and challenges he's faced throughout his career, and any other questions that might pop up. During his talk, if you do have any questions, feel free to add those into the chat box, and we will be sure to address those as the session continues. And then if there's opportunities, we'd love to have a couple different breakout sessions where we can do some smaller discussions as well, and then bring it back to the bigger group. So to begin, thank you all for coming. Alexi Lalas played college soccer at Rutgers before a long professional career that spanned from 1994 through 2008 in both Italy's Serie A and MLS. Lalas represented the U.S. men's national team, making 96 appearances and scoring 9 goals as a defender. In his professional career, Lalas has worked in the front office positions as president and or general manager for a number of MLS clubs, including the San Jose Earthquakes, New York Red Bulls, and LA Galaxy, before switching to the broadcast booth and working as a both commentator and studio analyst. So please pay attention and welcome Alexi Lalas.
Hello. Thank you. That's a hell of an introduction. Thank you. I love looking through these things. I've done so many of these and they're always interesting because I learn stuff, and thank you guys for coming and hanging out and paying attention. I will try not to be boring with anything that I say. I guess I'll just start out and then we can go from there. To thank you for having me to talk to you about different things. I certainly don't have all the answers. I turned 50 years old this year, and I'm still trying to figure it out each and every day. I make plenty of mistakes along the way, and will continue to do so. Hopefully, I'm limiting them. I hope you're all staying safe and sane through these interesting times. I was just saying, I have a 14, almost 15-year-old daughter and an 11, almost 12-year-old son. And I've told them they're going to have a hell of a story to tell, and one unlike any of us have ever experienced. So I can't impart information as to how to go through what we're going through right now. You're going to have to figure it out, and we're going to figure it all out together. And I hope that you are, through these, as I said, interesting and challenging times, keeping safe and healthy and as sane as we can possibly be through all the Zooms that we do and everything like that. And I know you got great leadership on the men's and women's sides and the administration that's trying to get us through the summer and then into a fall that I'm sure you already know. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what our world and our country and certainly our soccer is going to look like. But it is something that is part of your lives. It's something that's part of my life. We all understand it pales in comparison to all the other stuff. But this is what we love. This is what we talk about. This is part of what keeps us going and alive, and obviously a huge part of all of our lives in many different ways, whether on or off the field. And it is La Cosa Nostra. It's our thing, warts and all. It's not perfect, but it's what we love, and it will change. And what our game looks like going forward is going to be changed and is going to evolve and adapt, and that new normal, whatever it is in terms of life, is also going to incorporate a new type of soccer. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but all that is to say is we're going through unprecedented times, and ones that, we will all look back on 2020, and the hits just keep on coming when it comes to 2020, but hopefully we'll head in a positive direction. Matthew, how would you like to go about this?
Let's start with you kind of talking about your transition from being a soccer player in college to finding a professional league and then transitioning over to the new MLS. And then after that, life after soccer and being, in the business world on the broadcast side and the front office.
Okay, so really quick, when it comes to my background, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit in Michigan, and going back and forth between Detroit and Athens, Greece. My father was a professor and my mom was a writer. And to say that they had any ambitions or hopes and dreams of their firstborn being a professional soccer player would not even be close to the truth. It's not that they weren't proud. It's not that they didn't encourage me, but that was not something that they envisioned. And but then they realized that this was something that their kid liked. He was good at it, kept him out of trouble. And they certainly encouraged and supported me all the way through, but it wasn't any type of conversation that I could have with either one of them with regards to what I was undertaking when it came to soccer. Like a lot of you, I'm sure, but maybe in a much more rudimentary type of way. I took the college path. At that point, that was the only path from a soccer perspective, and I took it much more from an educational perspective, although I wasn't a great student. And I got into Rutgers University, which is the state university in New Jersey, and I went about it completely in the wrong way, in that I knew nothing about Rutgers. I knew nothing about exit 9 off of the Turnpike, and I had never been to the state of New Jersey, but it was the only place that I got accepted in. I wallpapered my wall with rejection notices. And my father put me in a car, drove me the 16 hours out to exit 9 off the Turnpike there at Rutgers, dropped me off and said, good luck. It's the complete wrong way to do it. And many of you, I'm sure, didn't do it like that. But that's how I got to the college part of it. And that's where my real soccer education started. And it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be on here for a number of different reasons, not the least of which is to see my good friend Paul Crumpy, who all of you know. And he figures prominently in the start of what I consider my education when it comes to soccer, because I vividly remember being on a soccer field when I first got called into the U.S. men's national team and having him throw balls as we warmed up, me going backwards, him going forward, doing inside of the foot, outside of the foot, the drills that everybody has done. And it was the start of this incredible adventure and this incredible association with the U.S. national team. And I had seen him and his generation through the late 80s and obviously into 90 doing things. And so for me, I was just trying not to mess up. So that's how I got into the college part of my existence. And being at Rutgers, I was exposed to a much higher level of soccer, higher level of player, higher level of coaching, higher level of facilities. And even saying that was back in the 80s, back in the previous century, back in before most of you were even born. And soccer was still a very Wild West type of situation when it comes to the United States. And so you had to figure it out as you went along. And you guys are so much more far along in terms of all of those things that I talked about, whether it's the coaching, the facilities, the understanding, the communication. I mean, the fact that we're doing this, so therefore the understanding of everybody that's out there, the scouting, all of that kind of stuff. But at least for me, coming from Detroit, it was a whole nother level. And I had to challenge myself, and I had to do it while obviously maintaining the academic part of it too. And I know, obviously, you guys are all in the college type of pathway, and there's a huge debate that goes on now as that pathway starts to shrink, shall we say, about what is the best path for a professional soccer player. Well, let's first off, cut to the chase, right? 99.9% of the players out there aren't going to be professional. And of those, even a smaller percent are actually going to be successful professionals. So it's a little strange talking about that. However, I will say that I think that in our effort and our zeal to create better soccer players out there in the United States, whether it's men's or women's, we have created a generation that oftentimes has bypassed the college experience. And I do think that you benefit from it. You guys are in a lucky position because you have great coaches on the men's and women's side that can make you better soccer players. But even if you were to take that out, some of the lessons and the experiences that you are having, whether it's 2020 or not, they are beneficial, because we talk so much about the 90 minutes that soccer players play. And we sometimes forget that arming them with the tools and the skills to function in that other 22 and a half hours is as important and sometimes even more important to their success in that 90 minutes. And so I just don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to college soccer. I know college soccer sometimes gets a bad rap, but I think it has an incredible value going forward for not just the production of soccer players, but the production of the men and women that are going to lead our country. And that is important to me. And maybe I'm just romantic and nostalgic and everything, but I do feel that it's important. And, someone like Paul or any of the coaches on this call, I would hope and I would think that the type of individual, the men and women that you are producing, is more important than the type of soccer player that you are producing. And that's a good thing. And so it warms my heart that you folks are recognizing that. And you might produce great soccer players. That's all wonderful. But you will also produce great men and women that, as I said, are going to lead what I think is the greatest country in the world, albeit with plenty of faults and plenty of challenges out there. So that's important. And not just our country, but you're also producing people that are going to lead other countries and be leaders. And I'm not talking just about presidents or anything like that, but be leaders in communities, whether it's the United States or anywhere else around the world. So that's my little college spiel and how I got to the college part of it, Matthew.
Great. And then what lessons did you learn in college that you said, these are things that can help shape you into your career that you were able to bring to your professional career?
Budgeting your time, understanding that, just showing up on time, first and foremost, and that type of responsibility, understanding the ability to balance all the other things and your responsibilities that you have off the field, leadership, all of the things that sports in general are important, but you're also in the confines of a campus. And so your interaction with your fellow students and that social interaction that you have, whether it's with soccer people or not, it doesn't really matter. But soccer is part of the ecosystem in any type of college campus, and you are going to be a reflection on your program. You're going to be a reflection on the game and soccer people within that ecosystem. And then when you get outside of it, you're also going to be reflected on. And having that responsibility, and more importantly, I guess the word is having the pride to do the things on and off the field that are going to reflect well on you, and that are going to reflect well on your program, and that are going to reflect well ultimately on the game. Because look, this is, as I said, this is our thing. You are part of the soccer community, whether you like it or know it or not. And the things that you do have an impact and do affect things. And so I learned a lot about that. I learned about challenging myself when it came to the things that I was doing, and the ability to have confidence in yourself. You'll have people that will lead you, and you'll have people that will support you. And we all need champions out there, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, whether it's other extended family, whether it's coaches, whether it's administrators. We will have those. But ultimately, the ability to rely on yourself and believe in yourself as a person, just a person, not necessarily a soccer player, but believe in yourself as a person that you are doing the right things. Doesn't mean you don't screw up. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but believing that you are heading in the right path. And that path will deviate and it will meander along. But having that conviction and that belief in yourself, I think, is crucial. And sometimes it comes out at times at arrogance, but if you can harness that beautiful arrogance and that belief in yourself and ultimately that confidence, that is some good fuel that will serve you well going forward, whether you're kicking a ball on the soccer field or doing other things off of the soccer field in life.
So how would you approach getting the most out of yourself and your team and your teammates so that when game day is here, you're at your peak level?
Yeah, so as a student athlete, you recognize that you have, other responsibilities. I'm not going to say more or less, because that's probably not fair or right relative to other students who I don't know, have other things going on in either their campus life or their college life or even their extended life out there that they have responsibilities. But you do have this sports component, and it requires you to do the things to prepare yourself. And that preparation is mental and physical, with the understanding that you're also at college and you're there to have that college experience, and you don't want to cheat yourself of those experiences that I've been talking about. but you do have to have a recognition that the things that you are doing, the sleep that you're getting, the things that you are eating, the things that you're not doing, let's be honest, can have a massive impact to what you're doing. In the same way that, look, if you have a final exam or something, and we've all been told about the fact that when you cram for an exam, ultimately there comes a point where you can't really cram anymore, and you're just actually doing yourself a disservice by staying up later and not giving yourself the rest. And in the same way that applies, it applies to whether it's training or whether it's games. It's recognizing that the things that you are doing now can impact how successful you are later. And I guess I'm not here to give you life lessons or anything like that, but it does apply both in the short term and the long term. The things that you are doing now, while they may seem hard or even they may seem strange, they will pay off. And they might pay off in the short term, or they might pay off in the long term. And so I recognize that. And look, it's trial and error. And as I said, you're going to make mistakes, but mistakes aren't the problem. It's just if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, then you got a problem that you're going to have to deal with. And if you don't deal with it, somebody else is going to deal with it for you.
Playing soccer, you get an opportunity to meet a number of different teammates. You get an opportunity to be in different areas. What are some of the things that you've learned that you really weren't expecting to take away from the game?
Well, I mean, I Paul can attest to this, and others can. Soccer, one of the things that appealed to me about the game of soccer was that this was something that was being played all over the world. And there's not a lot of things that bind us with, when I was 10 years old and I would go out on the sidewalk in front of my house in Detroit and juggle the ball, I knew that on the other side of the world, there was also a 10-year-old doing the exact same thing. And we might not share a whole lot in common, language, culture, experiences, day-to-day living or anything like that. But we did have that one thing in common, and that was the ball. And the ability to recognize that I was playing a game that the world was playing, that really appealed to me. And look, I grew up playing hockey, and I love our American sports and the things that we have done with it. But I guess it was kind of a, think globally but act locally type of thing. And I loved that about the game. And it has exposed me to so many different places, the travel involved that I've been fortunate enough to do, and to go all over the world to see the game. And in doing so, see so many different cultures and meet so many different people that without the game, to be quite honest, I don't know if I would have had those experiences. And that was an incredible benefit. And I was incredibly fortunate and privileged to be able to do that, because it gives you a better perspective. It gives you, either an appreciation or a greater appreciation for the situation that you are in, and maybe a better self-awareness of maybe how good you have it, or how lucky you are to be in that situation. Or it gives you a really good compare and contrast, and maybe opens up your mind about thinking about things in a different way. And while that may not have anything specifically or directly to do with kicking the ball, it came from the game. And, I was gifted that through the game, regardless if we won or not, being able to see some of those places and discover those things and bring that back with me in my mind to be able to think about things in a different way.
Over your career, the game has evolved. And what are some things that you see are different now, or when you finish playing versus when you were in college? And what would you teach a younger version of yourself so that you're better prepared?
Well, I mean, there's the usual things that are kind of timeless, in that you don't know what you got till it's gone, and your ability to appreciate the moment. And those all ring true. And since they are timeless, it means that no matter what, you're destined to repeat that. So, whether it's, education is sometimes wasted on the youth, or a professional soccer career is sometimes wasted on the youth. There's certain things that you just, in the moment, tend to not appreciate when it comes to living that. And you kind of have to go forward in age before you have that type of perspective to look back. But when I do look at at the world that you guys are growing up in relative to soccer. And when it comes to the world or our world in the United States, I mean, we are so much further along. We kick ourselves for what we haven't done, but we also have to pat ourselves on the back for how far we have come in a relatively short period of time. And I look at, for example, the supporters culture phenomenon that has happened over the last 20 years in the United States, and how much of it has become above ground. It's no longer underground or niche anymore. And the way that a whole generation now thinks of themselves and looks at themselves through the lens of soccer, and the way that they talk, and the way that they dress, in the things that are important to them. And it's so many different things, whether it's the, you know, the coming of age of the game with the 94 World Cup and then the 99 World Cup from the women's perspective, whether it's the formation of NWSL or all the other women's leagues that have come before, or MLS or USL, whether, you know, I said it's all the infrastructure, the stadiums that are online, the television that this generation is exposed to when it comes to soccer. There's just so much more at their fingertips. And that more isn't always better, but in this case, I think it's so much better. You know, the scouting network that I talked about, the ability to be seen, you know, the amount that actually of talent that falls through the cracks. I'm not saying there isn't talent that falls through the cracks, but it's much less than it used to be. And all of that kind of stuff bodes well for the future. And then, you know, the once again, an evergreen type of quality when it comes to American soccer is, you know, we're not king, and we do have all this other competition with other sports, but we've been able to kind of create this unique version of the game. And I for one, am incredibly proud of the fact that the American soccer culture is unlike any soccer culture around the world. We pick and choose and take the best parts of everything, and maybe we say, you know, that's not for us, but it's also constantly evolving and changing, and it's being done in a country that, you know, what I feel makes us the greatest country in the world is this incredible diversity and this melting pot that we have. But it's being done in a country where we have all of these different ideas about what the game is on and off the field. And it's wonderful. At times it's challenging, because even on this call, if I asked everybody on this call what you think is beautiful soccer, I'd get however many people are on, 50 or whatever different versions of what it is. And so we all have to find a way to come together at a certain point. And we don't always have to agree, but we are bringing this all together and kind of mixing it up into this American version of the game. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's going to produce something really, really unique when it comes to that ultimate culture that is American soccer. And maybe we never actually get to defining it. Maybe it's constantly changing, and maybe that in and of itself is what the culture is.
Yeah, that's great. One of the, you know, automatic themes now has to be overcoming and dealing with adversity. What are some pieces of advice that you have for our teams to be, you know, preparing for what's lying ahead, utilizing the time they have now, and overcoming the challenges that we're facing?
So one thing that you find whenever, and it's not even about the elite level, but anytime that you go up a level and you are challenged and you are competing against better people. When I say competing, not just about soccer, but just competing in life, you will find that those that succeed are able to recognize that it's not about being twice or three times the player. Sometimes it's really, really fine margins that separate the good from the great. And the ability to recognize opportunity and use that opportunity. So, you know, for example, you know, last night I was working and, you know, talking about Major League Soccer, which has just come back online over the last week. And so for the last 3 months, these players have been, like many of you, Zooming, being at home. And some of them will have recognized beforehand that, look, we all know it sucks and we can all be down about it. And certainly there's a moment for that. But some of them will have recognized that, hey, this is an opportunity. And even if it's something as small as, you know what, going into quarantine and the lockdown, I wasn't good at the outside of my left foot or something like that. And if you had used those 3 months where all you did was get better in that one little small aspect, that might be the difference between being good and being great. And so there are those that will have used this and looked at it as much as it sucks, as find the positive in there and find the opportunity in there. And then it's about work. And a lot of it isn't necessarily the physical part of it. It's up here, as a lot of things in life are. And that's what's going to separate you, and not just separate you as a soccer player, but separate you as a person. Can you find an advantage somewhere that through hard work will enable you to separate yourself? And when I say separate, it's not night and day. Sometimes it's just this much more. And maybe that outside of the left foot ball that you were able to hit, either on goal or as a pass, that now makes you a better player. And maybe that's what separates you from starting or not starting, or winning an award, or winning a game, or whatever it ends up being. So, you know, these are some of the things that we are thinking about and that we are talking about. And when it comes to the professional game, where it is their job to play soccer, I think it's fair. And one of the things we're doing right now is judging the individual player, judging the teams, judging the staff as to what have they emerged like? What are they looking like? Have they done work? Are there teams that haven't done work? Why haven't they done that work? And look, I know that there's challenges out there, but I do think, for example, if a team or a player emerges from this and is visibly better and has improved in some way, or hasn't regressed as some have, that's a quality, and there's something to be celebrated and praised in people that recognized ahead of time and then did the work, even when nobody was watching. By the way, when nobody was watching. And that's where most of the work gets done, is when people aren't watching.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you for all these answers. I have a submitted question from one of our student athletes. And he asked, in terms of tactics, what's the difference, the biggest difference in playing soccer in the United States versus overseas in Europe?
So when I first played in Europe, I went to Italy, and one of the weird things is in 1994, I played in the World Cup, which was actually here in the United States. And when I stepped on the field, while I had a ridiculous number of international caps and appearances, I had never been on the books at a club team. And so usually what happens is you play well in a club situation, the national team sees you, they bring you in, then you either do well and you continue on, or you don't. If you look at guys like myself and Kobe Jones, when we stepped on that field, because we would have been in residence for 2 years, all we did was play international games, and that was our only experience. So my first experience being in a club was being in Italy, and not just being in Italy, but being in Italy in the 90s, when Serie A over there was the place to go. Most money, the most prestige, all the best players. And for me, not having grown up in that soccer type of culture, to get thrown into that fishbowl that is soccer over in a place like Italy, and it applies to other places too, but that was a eye-opening experience to know that what happened in that game on Sunday can impact your life that next morning when you go to the bank or when you go to the supermarket. And what happens, you know, the competition of, you know, you're taking food off of somebody's table. And by the way, you're a high-profile player and an international player, and so the expectation is that you perform. You know, all of those different things and all of those different dynamics came into play, and really, it was an eye-opening, as I said, eye-opening experience, and really interesting for me to go through that, even though I had just played in a World Cup. It gave me a certain level of credibility and experience, but I had to kind of start over and figure out what a club type of scenario and situation was, because I hadn't been through something like that.
We have a number of international players on both rosters. What were some of the things that helped make sure that when you were playing in Italy, you were able to transition right away and get onto the pitch and perform?
So first is language. You know, the first night that I ever was in Italy, I went right from the airport, and they drove me up to the beautiful Italian Alps where we were staying in preseason. And they roomed me with the only other player on the team that even spoke a little English, and he only spoke a little English. And I remember sitting down with him in the hotel room after dinner and conjugating verbs and starting to conjugate verbs. And look, as I said, I wasn't a great student or by any means, but I at least was smart enough to understand that this would help me. I wanted to know what people were saying, either about me or about the situation. I wanted to be able to communicate, obviously, with either my teammates or with the public. And I also recognized that even from an optics perspective, learning the language, it endears you, and it gives you a little bit of a cushion. And so I knew from that moment that that was important. So that was good. And I was encouraged by others. Even though they didn't speak English, they really were supportive of me learning it. And they just wanted, even if I screwed it up, it really didn't matter, as long as they saw that I was making an effort. And it really was a form of respect, if you will. So that was, that was important. Secondly, recognizing that I was a guest in somebody else's country and culture. And while I may have ideas that I'm going to bring to the table and obviously champion at times, I'm still a guest, and being open to understanding that just because I think a certain way or act a certain way or do a thing a certain way, doesn't mean that's not, it's not inappropriate. It's just, it doesn't mean that it's going to play the same way in a completely different culture. And by no means do I mean try to be something that you're not, or dampen who you are or anything like that, but just recognize that in a different country and in a different culture, you are also representing your country, and in my case, my game. And I didn't want to leave a bad impression of who I was, because it reflected on me. But as I told you earlier, also what it reflected on American soccer. I wanted to do well on the field, and I wanted to be, perceived as good off the field in who I was, without completely abandoning who you are as a personality or character or anything like that. But it did mean something to me to hopefully leave a good impression of myself, and directly or indirectly American soccer, not have it be scorched earth.
And as a follow-up to that, one of our athletes asked, how did you deal with the language barrier at the beginning, and how long did it take you to become comfortable or fluent or whatever level you ended up being?
Yeah, I mean, different cultures deal with it differently. Obviously, in Italy, as I was saying before, they were much more receptive, and they were willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, and making mistakes didn't matter. They were just so excited because, once again, it was a form of respect to actually try to learn the language. And it really does help. And covering leagues now for so many years and covering players, I covered the Bundesliga for a bunch of years, and almost to a man, the players that are able to go over and figure out how to speak German, it really, really helps them. So they were really supportive in Italy. I would go on television shows and I would do interviews, and it was this strange mix of Italian and Spanish, which I knew coming over, which actually helped a lot, and English. And they didn't care that I was messing up words or tenses or anything like that, as long as I was trying. And in a moment where they might have just crushed you for a bad game or a bad pass or anything like that, there maybe it's just that brief moment where they give you a benefit of the doubt, because you look like you're trying. And look, ultimately, we're all going to be judged by the wins and losses when it comes to professional game, and whether you play well or you don't. But there are moments where you need a little help. And I didn't want to do anything that was going to be detrimental, and I wanted to do things that would give me a little bit of help. And even something like
With MLS first starting, and when you first got out of college, there was no outdoor American Pro League. What was it in your mind deciding to come to the States again to play versus staying overseas and continuing in an established league?
And one of the proudest moments of my life was getting on the plane. As much as I loved my experience in Italy, was getting on the plane and flying back in 1996 for the beginning of Major League Soccer. And, look, I stand on the shoulders of giants that will never be known and will never get the praise and the due that they deserve, because American soccer didn't start with the 94 World Cup. Okay. And American soccer didn't start with Major League Soccer in 1996. There's a whole history that of players that work, but this is our thing. And this is about leaving something for that next generation. I'm so proud that all of the stuff that I went through, first off, it was better than the previous generation. But when I look at a kid that's growing up today, and they don't have to go through any of that, it makes me incredibly proud of the world that they are growing up in, and the soccer world that they are growing up in right now. And I think back to the challenges that we have, or that we had, and it was crazy on and off the field, and none of that exists anymore. There's still challenges nowadays. But, when I think of coming back to Major League Soccer, that moment, getting on the plane, coming back to be the start of something from the beginning, you don't get a lot of chances to be there from the start. You might start a company, or you might be there at day one of a company being started. And it's amazing to look back. But to say that I was there at the beginning of 1996 and something that not only lasted my career, but hopefully is going to last well beyond my lifetime, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool thing to say. And so that's the way that I was thinking about it, is that, and look, Paul will tell you what we all know, that our past is littered with defunct teams and leagues, and it's a Wild West type of existence. And this is the most successful, in terms of Major League Soccer, the most successful American/Canadian league that we've ever had in history. Doesn't mean it's promised tomorrow. I mean, it could go away. I hope it doesn't. But we are much further along than we were. But you got to start somewhere. And so it was much more about a pride about coming back and being there from the start of something that we believed. We didn't know. We had cautious optimism that this was going to be the one that was going to stick. And it's not perfect. It's got plenty of problems and challenges. But yeah, it was about pride in '96 coming back.
Thank you. And when transitioning for your career after soccer, were there things you did as a player to prepare yourself, or was it as soon as you finished your last appearance, you then started focusing? What were your steps to making sure that you'd have a successful year, whether it's, any kind of one of our students ending after their college time or after years of professional? What is it that they can be doing to make sure they're professionally successful?
Yeah, so as I've told you, I think numerous times now, I wasn't the smartest guy, but this thing I did know, and because young players will come and ask me for advice, why I don't know, but the limited advice that I have is, if you see a jumping off point, look at it very, very carefully. We all want a career to end in this wonderful, after incredible longevity, then end in this wonderful moment, and you ride off into the sunset, and there's all of these opportunities. And the reality is that for 99.999% of the players out there, men, women, at whatever level, that's not how it ends. A lot of times you'll walk into a room and you will be sat down, and when you walk out of that room, you don't have a job and you don't know what your prospects are. I was at least smart enough to know that when those opportunities came along, to think long and hard about them, because they might not be there when I wanted them. And so I saw an opportunity when I was 33 years old to go into the front office and front offices of Major League Soccer. And I could have continued to play, but I recognized that while I could play a couple more years, then those opportunities might not be there. And this was an opportunity for me to get a whole different type of experience and use it to propel me into what's going to lead me for the next chapter of my life, where I don't even kick a soccer ball. And so those are the types of things that I was thinking about. In 2000, I took a year off from soccer, which is not the normal thing to do. Way before Landon Donovan was ever taking a sabbatical, I was taking sabbaticals way back in the day. And I had been burning it at both ends, on and off the field, for a number of years. And I just got to the point where I knew I needed to stop playing. And I stopped playing for a full year. And I actually went and did television. And that was really, really eye-opening and interesting for me, and kind of set the groundwork for me to then do some stuff later on. I worked the Olympics in Sydney, in Australia, and did some shows here, and did some local regional play-by-play type of stuff, because I knew that was something that interested me. But I also knew that I still had some years to play, and then I went back and continued to play. And then once again, that moment where I could have continued to play, but if there is an opportunity out there, I know we all have our hopes and dreams, and I would never want to deter anybody from following them, even if you fail. But you also have to be smart, and you have to recognize that opportunities will come along. And you hope that other ones will come along later on, and it doesn't mean that you have to definitely say yes to everything out there, but just think long and hard. And if there's an opportunity for you to, like I said, take a step off into something else that is then going to put you in a position to succeed even longer, that's it. Because while a career may be defining and it may be a wonderful point of your life, it's very finite and it's a very small portion of your life. If you, knock on wood, live a long life, and the things that you do can help you, but it will come and go much quicker than you ever thought it would. And you better have some other things in your life that excite you and challenge you in different ways, because you'll never be able to replicate actually playing, that you can go to, because that's going to be the majority of your life. Let's be honest, because I said, you know, a career is a very short period of time relative to a long lifespan.
Thank you. On the field, you know, the game evolves and we see different styles of play and different techniques. In the past couple of years, in terms of the U.S. game, what do you see as the trend now, and do you kind of see it changing or keeping going forward?
Okay, so let's talk some soccer here. So, you know, sometimes we talk about the past of American soccer, and we kind of talk about it in these, for lack of a better, like these caveman type of terms, in that all we did was kick the ball long and you know, break legs and grunt as we ran around the field. That's not necessarily true, but the game absolutely has evolved. And I think, you know, for example, if you look at the you know, the men's team, let's take the men's team first, and then we'll go to the women's side. If you take the men's team right now, they are trying to do some things that haven't been done in the past, either because it wasn't the thing to do, or wasn't the latest fad, or just the recognition that we just didn't have the players to do what Greg Berhalter wants to do right now. Now, maybe he still doesn't have the players, but at least he's trying to do something. I believe that he is a true believer in what he wants to do. I believe he's a romantic. I'm not necessarily sure if this works out ultimately, but I have to respect the fact that he wants to do some things different. And we talk about, a lot of this boils down to possession and playing out of the back. Right? I mean, that is the thing that everybody does right now, that everybody kind of wants to do. And that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to, from the goalkeeper, play it short, break lines, and get through whatever pressure that you have after, you know, 15 passes or whatever it ends up being, and then put it in the back of the net. And that, to a lot of people, is sexy soccer. To a lot of people, that is romantic. To a lot of people, that's the beautiful game. Okay. Now, look, I'm not going to go off into a tangent and argue that I can argue that a long ball that is perfectly placed into a post-up type of player who brings it down off of one touch and lays it off and then goes through is as beautiful to me as the 5 passes or anything like that. But that's what we're talking about right now, and I think it's fascinating to see as to whether this is going to be able to be implemented by Greg Berhalter, especially now, because he's not going to have a lot of time with the team. Or is this actually the right way to go? Because I mentioned earlier about all of these different and diverse type of ways of thinking about the game. That makes it kind of hard for someone like Greg Berhalter to put 11 men on the field that all think about the game in the same way. And it means it's much more exclusive as opposed to inclusive. And that, you know, that sometimes runs counter to what we are as a country. But he has to find the players, if he hasn't already, that are able to implement what he wants to do. And I don't know if it's going to work. I think it's going to be fascinating to see, because in theory, this is a more evolved type of approach as to how to play the game. You know, on the women's side, it's a little different, because we have dominated for so long, and we have reaped the benefits from let's be honest, a culture and society that has valued women's sports, and when it comes to the men, or the women's to women's soccer, has put in the resources. Enough? No, but certainly a whole lot more than pretty much everybody else. And that's why we are the juggernaut that we are. But other countries are trying to catch up, and other countries are putting more resources in, and there will be more competition. And so how we go about changing and evolving either how we play or how we identify our women's players, or being able to maintain that distance that we have gotten, that's what's going to be fascinating. And, you know, always having a target on our back. Now, two-time World Cup champions in a row. Can you go for 3? How do you freshen it up. And now without the Olympics being this summer, and who knows if they're going to be next summer, let's fingers crossed everything goes well. It's fascinating. Look, it's a good problem to have from a women's perspective. And if you look at the two sides of the program, the women continue to lead the way when it comes to what they are doing, the success, the attention, the relevant nature of what they are doing on and off the field relative to the men's side. So the men, first and foremost, had to figure out a way to qualify and get back. Not that should be a cause for celebration, because we've done it many, many times before, but let's be honest, we didn't do it last time, so that's the first order of business.
Following up on that, what was your reaction to the USDA and the development programs changing and closing down, and how that can affect the future of U.S. soccer?
So I think it goes back to, philosophy. A lot of times we'll talk about style of play or identity or philosophy and all of these different words that we throw out. And, you guys have a philosophy, and it comes from the coaching staff that wants to say, this is how we are going to play. Some of it is, this is how we're going to play, and we're going to get the players to play like that. Some of it is, okay, we might want to play like this, but these are the players that we have, and so this is what we are going to do. And I think I love that, but it also means that everybody's going to have a different idea. And so when U.S. Soccer was in the business of player development, they're going to decide ultimately that this is how we want to play, and that is going to come down from on high. And I think there was the recognition that they don't want to be in that type of development situation. They're still going to have youth national teams and still have an identity and a way of playing, but they really wanted to give it back to, obviously, the teams and the clubs so that they can define it. And, the LA Galaxy might want to play very differently than, Landon's San Diego team down there, or LAFC want to play very differently than any other program. And within colleges might want to play different types of styles. And I think what it's going to do is make people and force players to really examine where they go and the type of player that they are, and is it the right fit? And by the way, that examination is going to be done on the other side too. And you're going to have to be able to articulate. And this is what I harp on, and not to get off on a tangent here, is people talk about so much stuff, but they don't publicly and privately articulate it and then agree on it. Have a collective agreement that this is who we are. This is how we're going to play. Because don't talk to me about identity or philosophy of play if you're not willing to stand by it, okay? If you are not willing to formulate it and articulate it publicly and privately so that everybody can understand and accept this is what we're doing. That's a style of play. And a lot of people will say it, but they're really not, they're really just kind of winging it when we go down there. And, we've winged a lot of stuff over the years, and I don't want people to wing it. Even if I don't agree with it, or even if I don't fit with it, I would rather have someone have a plan that I think is flawed than someone have no plan at all.
All right, so we have a few more minutes with Alexi, so if there are any final questions, please send those in. One question that came in, what is your most memorable game?
Oh, look, I'm sitting in front of you today because of the '94 World Cup, and it changed my life forever. I lived the power of what a World Cup can do to an individual. It's why I'm so excited about 2026 when we'll get the World Cup back, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be incredible. But there's a player right now that we may know or we may not know. There could be a player here on this Zoom call whose life is going to completely change. So the '94 World Cup and obviously down the road here in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, the game against Colombia changed everything. All intents and purposes, we had gone through to the next round, gotten out of the group. There was a lot of pressure on us to from a soccer perspective, bring some pride and not embarrass ourselves. Let's be honest. And so that day was phenomenal. That was one of those days that you grow up thinking about, the flag and an American crowd and doing something that people said couldn't be, all that kind of stuff. That was one of the good days in my life, without a doubt. And on a wonderful summer. And I, as I said, I benefited on and off the field from the power of what a World Cup can do to an individual, and it will change your life forever. And so I don't know who that player is going to be in 2026, but it's going to be fun to be able to see it again Obviously, not just the United States, with Canada and Mexico being the joint hosts there, and it's going to be great. I can't wait.
Who's the best player you ever played with, and who's the best player you ever played against?
So I always say when it comes to what I played with, it's Tab Ramos. For those that don't know, God, 5'6" probably. I don't know, Paul. You tell me. But he he was, and he is. And he's now the coach in Houston. He was a man out of time. When I stepped on the field with the national team with him, it was very, very clear that he was too good for any of us. He was slumming playing with us, believe me, and he was almost detrimental in that he was so much better than any of us that he would do things and be thinking things that none of us could even comprehend. And he was on such a different plane that it actually hurt us at times having him there. Or we would just give the ball and kind of fold our arms and say, all right, do what you do. And he would have to do it all alone because nobody was even close to his level. I would have loved to see someone like Tab Ramos, what he would have been had he been born 20 years later. And, into all the things that we've talked about, into a very, very different U.S. soccer culture. I have a feeling that he would have not just been one of the great American players in the world, but just one of the great players in the world who happens to be American. And I know there's a lot of talk about Christian Pulisic, who's just a wonderful, wonderful talent. But when I think about what Tab was able to do way back then was amazing. I mean, his first two steps, his low center of gravity, his weight shifting, and then his touch, all of that kind of stuff was light years ahead of a lot of us. So I always have, when I get this question all the time, I always say Tab.
That's awesome. And I guess the question then becomes, is he your view of the greatest U.S. soccer player in history?
Oh, the greatest U.S. soccer player in history? Well, it's Mia Hamm. If we're asking if we have to split them up between men and women, I would say Mia Hamm, because I think she fundamentally changed the way that we think, not just about women's soccer, but soccer in the United States. A reluctant hero, but still the level of notoriety and publicity that she generated for herself and then for the game at a time when everybody was kind of focused with 99 and everything. It was incredible. When it comes to the men's side, I go back and forth, but I still think the best player is Landon. I would always pick, it goes between Landon and Clint Dempsey. I always said that if I had to win a World Cup game, I would pick Landon Donovan. But if I had to win a bar fight, I would pick Clint Dempsey. And that's just a way of saying that they were very, very different types of players and types of personalities. Let's be honest. But yeah, those are that's the hierarchy, I guess, that I look at right now. But the young talent that we have coming out, I mentioned Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams and Jordan Morris's and all of these different players that are coming along. I still remain very positive and bullish about the future, and not making the World Cup in 2018 from a men's perspective was devastating. We're still feeling the effects, but it happens, and maybe we needed to step back in order to go 2 steps forward. But let's not take another step back going forward. So Greg Berhalter and company, I hope they figure it out and they qualify for that next one. And then obviously in 2026 do some good things. It's a nice little ramp we have up to 2026.
Well, on behalf of LMU and the men's and women's soccer programs, I thank you, and I know our coaches and student athletes thank you for coming on. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave our players with before we wish you goodbye?
No, I mean, I just want to say thank you again for everybody and for letting me do this. I'm still trying to figure it out. As I said before, I have fond memories of LMU over the years, whether it was training there with the national team way back in the day, whether it was training there with the Galaxy. I remember Ziggy Schmidt running us, making us go for a run through that entire neighborhood that you guys obviously know, and having the entire LA Galaxy team cutting through people's backyards and across people's front lawns and everything as we went round around that neighborhood. getting ready for well, what would have been preseason, I guess. So you guys are in, even though it's a very different situation right now, you're still in rarefied air, and take advantage of it, use it, respect it, and recognize that, you know, the things that you do today will help you going forward. And as I said before, not even about kicking the ball. And you have some wonderful leadership and some wonderful champions in the coaching staff that you have on both the men's side and the women's side, and then the administrators who are there to support you, and they're there to help you, and they're there ultimately to make you better people when they kick you back out into this crazy world that we live in. And maybe you're better soccer players, and hopefully you're better soccer players, but most importantly, hopefully you're better people. But it's not one-sided. You gotta be part of it. So don't hesitate to do that, and to use all of those things at your disposal, because you're much more fortunate than a lot of people out there. And so perspective is important, I think, in this time. When I'm talking to my kids or anybody else, you know, they live in, as I said, rarefied air, and are much more fortunate and privileged than a lot of people out there. And, you know, I'll leave you with this. I'm working the Major League Soccer return that is happening down in Orlando. And, you know, we hear sometimes professional athletes, whether it's soccer or anybody else, sometimes lose perspective and complain about the heat down there, or complain about a box lunch that they have to eat, or morning games or anything like that. And, you know, we are very, very fortunate relative to a lot of people out there who are struggling and don't have the advantages and don't have the benefits that are given to us. And it doesn't mean you have to apologize for it, okay? And it doesn't mean you have to harp on it, but at the very least, you got to respect it and use it to your advantage. Because the worst thing in the world is to be given those opportunities and given those benefits, and for you either not to recognize it, or recognize it and not to utilize it to your advantage. So take advantage of it, because it will make your life on and off the soccer field a whole lot better going forward.
Well, thank you, Alexi, for taking an hour to speak with both of our programs. And, you know, once we get back into regularity, you're more than welcome to catch a game at Sullivan Field and join us then.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for sticking around and not clicking off. So go do much more important things. All right, go be good people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a heads up, it's good to see all the men and the women on this call. Before Alexi leaves, there's some news that came out for our international students that the Trump administration, just while we were on this call, backed off from forcing international students to take anything but online classes. So some really good news especially for our internationals. So just so you guys are aware, there was some good news on top of all the discussion with Alexi.
Nice. All right.
Alexi, good seeing you, man.
Good to see you.
It's been a long time. I know. Well, you got to see Tab last night, by the way.
I did, yeah. So
you didn't see him in person, but you saw him on the field.
We saw him on the field. So it's an amazing thing they got going down there in Orlando, and NWSL over in Utah, and USL coming back too. So we'll see. You know, we'll keep our fingers crossed that everybody stays safe.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really, really appreciate it. And it was cool because some of the stuff you talked about were things that we had the same conversation about earlier in the summer. So earlier in the pandemic, I should say. So this was kind of cool though to do this with the women. We had been on calls throughout the time, but this is the first time we've done the men and the women together. So
nice.
Really appreciate you tying them.
Do you have any protocols yet for what's happening in the fall, or is it all just wait and see?
It's all changing every day, man.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, I mean, you've heard about the Ivy League and the Big Ten and the Pac-12. So, you know, we're waiting. We're supposed to get our information maybe tomorrow on our future, but again, it changes all the time.
Well, you got to be flexible in this age. So, all right, guys and girls.
All right. Thank you again, Alexi.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks for the shirt, too. Shirts.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.